God is working behind the scenes to keep his promises, even when it looks impossible. And remember, he is also still blessing the nations through Abraham's descendants, just as he said he would do long ago.
Welcome to Mission 66, your daily journey through God's Word, powered by Bible teacher Dr. Luis Sayao and Transworld Radio. We're currently in the book of Genesis. Want to go deeper? Grab your free study guide at mission66.org. Now let's dive in with our teacher John Matthews and co-host Esther Sisulu.
Welcome to our program of adventure, suspense, and knowledge from the pages of the eternal book, the Bible. Now we're going through the book of Genesis, and today we'll be focusing on chapters 20 and 21 as it shows us how God fulfilled a promise made to Abraham and his wife Sarah that they would have a son. And we'll also learn that God always keeps his promises, even if it takes longer than what we like. Our teacher today is John Matthews, and he will present the theme, The Impossible Promise Fulfilled.
Esther, thank you so much. Great to be with you, and a very warm welcome to Mission 66 as always. And here we are seeing this incredible journey that God was leading Abraham along. This man who was recognized as the father of faith. Now, the account of his life began there in Genesis chapter 12 when God revealed himself to Abraham when he was living in Ur of the Chaldees. That was over in ancient Babylonia where the Tigris and the Euphrates flow close together. And God tells Abraham to move out of there and go to a land that he wasn't going to show him now, but that he'd show him later. So Abraham goes, not knowing where he was going. And he takes his nephew Lot with him. And so they're wandering. They're just wandering around in tents. All the time, Abraham and his wife Sarah were there waiting on God to fulfill his promise that they would bear this offspring, they'd have this child that would bless the world. But nothing was happening. Sarah continued to be barren. And so they try and solve this issue themselves. They take back control. And so Abraham fathers a child through their servant girl Hagar, and Ishmael is born. But God had promised to bring forward a child through Abraham and Sarah, and eventually, 24 years after making that promise, God does what seemed impossible. And, today's episode, we get to read about the joy of that happy result in Genesis 20 and 21. So let's go. Starting at verse 1. From there, that's where they were living at that particular time, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb, which is the desert area in the south of what is now known as Israel. And he lived between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. Now, this was a Philistine town along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Now, Abimelech here is a generic title for Philistine kings from the time of Abraham through to David. And Abimelech, not knowing that Sarah was married to Abraham, took her as if to marry her. Now, does that ring a bell if you've been listening to Mission 66 on a regular basis? Because you're right, we've seen this before, and we've seen it with Abraham because he told exactly the same lie when he visited Egypt. He told the Pharaoh that Sarah was his sister because he was afraid that they would murder him. And now here again, he makes the same mistake, this time with Abimelech. Verse 3 says, "But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and he said to him, 'Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife.' Now Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, 'Lord, will you kill an innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she herself said, 'He is my brother'? In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands I have done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore I did not let you touch her. Now then, return the man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech rose early in the morning. He called all his servants, and he told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham, and he said to him, "What have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you, that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said to Abraham, "What did you see that you did this thing?" And Abraham replied, "I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, 'This is the kindness you must do to me. At every place to which we come, say of me, he is my brother.' Then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants, and he gave them to Abraham, and he returned Sarah his wife to him. And Abimelech said, 'Behold, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you.' And to Sarah he said, 'Behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you, and before everyone you are vindicated.' Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, and also healed his wife and female slaves, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife." So Abraham here had been foolish and had lacked faith again. And this lack of faith had endangered Abimelech's life. If he had touched Sarah, he would have died. And he also endangered Sarah as well. Let's move on to chapter 21, where we see how God, though, finally fulfills his promise. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. And Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, "God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me." And she said, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." And Isaac means laughter. And the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing in a mocking way. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out this slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac." Now Sarah had said this in a moment of anger, because Ishmael seemed to be mocking Isaac, whom she had borne. But this verse also proved really prophetic, and in the book of Galatians, the Apostle Paul uses it to show the difference between the age of law and the age of grace, which we are in now. But we'll talk about that together with Esther in just a few minutes. But let's read on with verse 11. And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, Be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, do as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named. This means that the descendants of Abraham would be birthed through the line of Isaac. And God said, I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring. So Abraham rose early in the morning, and he took bread and a skin of water, and he gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the child under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him a good way off, about the distance of a bowshot, for she said, Let me not look on the death of the child. And as she sat opposite him, she lifted up her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the boy. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, What troubles you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. Up, lift up the boy, and hold him fast with your hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Now notice that Ishmael was around 13 years old at this time, and this is how God watches over us. And he'll rescue us even as he rescued Hagar, who was not even looking for him. And so what mercy he has on them both, and how he hears their cry, the cry of the boy. And he allows them to find this water in the wilderness. And now, to finish chapter 21, we're back to Abraham as he makes a deal with the Philistine chieftain Abimelech. Verse 22. At that time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore swear to me here, by God, that you will not deal falsely with me or with my descendants or with my posterity, but as I have dealt kindly with you, so you will deal with me and with the land where you have sojourned. And Abraham said, I will swear. Now, I don't think this is a particularly, Esther, friendly contract, because Abraham had lied to Abimelech already, so there was clearly a trust issue between them. Abraham didn't think particularly kindly toward Abimelech either, so the deal was along the lines of don't attack me and I won't attack you. Verse 25 goes on to say, when Abraham reproved Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized, Abimelech said, I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, and I've not heard of it until today. So Abraham took sheep and oxen, and he gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock apart, and Abimelech said to Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs that you've set apart? And Abraham said, these 7 ewe lambs you will take from my hand. that this may be a witness for me that I dug this well. Therefore, that place was called Beersheba, because there both of them swore on oath. And so they made a covenant at Beersheba, and Beersheba actually means the well of the oath. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, rose up and returned to the land of the Philistines. And Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and called there on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. And Abraham sojourned many days in the land of the Philistines. You see, Abraham was a worshipper of God and was still learning how to call upon him in prayer. And notice Joel in chapter 2 verse 32 said, "And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved." That Lord is Jesus Christ. And the message rings resonant and clear throughout the pages of this incredible book, the Bible. Call upon him and you will be saved.
We're reading about the life of Abraham today on Mission 66. This is our Bible study program with our friend and Bible scholar, John Matthews. And I'm your host, Esther. Now, John, the question often comes up, how did the Bible characters know that God was speaking to them? I mean, how did Abraham know that he was supposed to move out? What did he hear? Did he hear voices?
Well, Esther, in the book of Hebrews, it says that in the past, God spoke to people in many ways, including the prophets. And we'll also read in the Bible how people saw visions or they were visited by God's angels, and dreams also, haven't they? They figured heavily in the history of mankind. And even today, God is perfectly able to reveal himself through dreams and other means. And here you have Abraham who just knew when God revealed himself. And he received specific instructions, also some impossible promises. And God came to Abimelech in a dream one night, and he said to him, you're as good as dead because of the woman you have taken. In the Gospels, Joseph knew to take the baby Jesus down to Egypt because he was warned in a dream. And we see the angel of the Lord appearing in the Old Testament and speaking clearly, face to face with mankind, with Abraham, as he did in a recent episode. So God can be incredibly creative in the ways that he communicates to us. But Hebrews also says that in these last days, God has spoken to us by his Son, that is, by Jesus Christ. And there may still be visions and prophecies to give us direction, but we've got to consider the words of Jesus as the final authority of the will of God. And the Bible is now a completed work, the Old and the New Testaments. And any modern day prophet who speaks in the name of the Lord, well, they've got to defer to what is already written down.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's go back to where Sarah was mad at Ishmael and said to Abraham, well, cast out the slave woman with her son, for the son of the slave woman shall not be heir with my son. Now, I know you briefly touched on this earlier on, and you seem to think that there was an important prophetic connection on this.
Yeah, the Apostle Paul, Esther, wrote in Galatians 4 in the New Testament, explaining to the Christians the difference between the law of Moses and the age of grace by faith in Jesus. I'll read it here from verse 22 of Galatians 4. For it is written that Abraham, said Paul, had two sons, one by a slave woman and one by a free woman. But the son of the slave was born according to the flesh, while the son of the free woman was born through promise. Now this may be interpreted allegorically, verse 24 goes on to say. These women are two covenants. One is from Mount Sinai, bearing children for slavery. She is Hagar. Now, Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia. She corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free, and she is our mother. The law was given to Moses on Mount Sinai, and when Galatians was written, the Jews in Jerusalem who'd rejected Jesus were still in bondage, as it were, to the law. But those who believe in Jesus were set free from the rigors and the constraints of the law. Paul even says this is an allegory where Ishmael represents the law and Isaac represents the freedom that was on its way through Jesus Christ, who would be born of his very line.
Thanks, John. Now let's look at God talking about Abimelech. And he tells him that Abraham should pray for him because Abraham was a prophet. I think this is interesting because was Abraham actually considered one of the prophets?
Well, that's exactly what it says in this chapter, doesn't it? And God had clearly stated that Abraham's descendants be a blessing for all nations. So in a sense, Abraham is performing the prophet's duty in interceding for others. He interceded for Lot, and God spared him from that destruction of Sodom. He intercedes here for Abimelech, and he's healed. And I believe, actually, that this is the first time the word prophet is used in the Bible, and it's used to describe Abraham.
Well, now for a question I believe has been on the minds of everyone, and that is why you think God took so long to fulfill his promise to Abraham. In fact, why does God sometimes take much, much longer than we think to answer our prayers?
Well, I think one of the reasons, Esther, why God takes so long to fulfill his promises may be because he's trying to show that he is the one behind it all and that it wasn't done by any kind of human effort. Sometimes we as humans have a bit of a problem, and that is we're happy to have our prayers answered, but then we have trouble believing that it was actually God who answered the prayer, not sheer coincidence or something actually that we did. So let's say Abraham had a child when Sarah was 20 odd years younger. Or some might say that it was just a bit of a coincidence. So God, within that context, had to give it time so that it would appear impossible without his intervention. Plus, something radical changes in our hearts very often when we wait. I've heard it said that waiting may just be the greatest teacher and trainer in godliness, maturity, and genuine spirituality that most of us will ever encounter.
Absolutely. And when looking at Hagar and Ishmael, I think we can also learn that God was merciful and patient with them, even though they weren't included in the line which God, had said would go to Isaac. And I think God could have let them die in the desert. He could have let them die of thirst, but he really extended his mercy to them, and he made a way for them as well.
Yeah, I know what you mean, Esther. And there's a lovely gentleness and compassion in the way that God deals with Hagar and Ishmael here, and the fact that he goes after them. If we want to emulate God and be more like him, then we need to also be generous and hospitable to everybody. That includes people who are way outside of our understanding and our life experience. It's everybody. People who are enemies of God today may well come to know and serve him someday. And we have no idea how those little acts of kindness may influence them in the long run.
Well, John, as always, this truly has been such a valuable study, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to answer our questions. So we've explored chapters 20 and 21 of Genesis. How should we summarize them?
Yeah, let's do that. Well, the greatest lesson really here, Esther, is the birth of Isaac. And the lesson there is that God never fails. He never fails. He keeps his promises, even if it takes a long, long time. And we sometimes understandably are tempted to give up or try to hurry God along with our own attempts to answer our own prayers. But my encouragement to you listening today, guys, is wait upon the Lord. Wait upon him. He's never late. He knows all things, including how best to answer and when the right time to answer is. God is completely aware of your situation today. He knows far better than you when things should happen and why, for the ultimate good. In the meantime, it can test our patience, but let's ask him to help us develop the ability to keep on believing, to keep on practicing patience, to grow in faith when it seems really hard. And doesn't this chapter end by showing us once again that God is always at work behind the scenes, keeping his promises, even when it looks the opposite, when it looks impossible? And remember that he is also still blessing the nations through Abraham's descendants, just as he said he was going to do long ago.
Well, speaking of testing our patience, as we continue with our adventure next time, we'll move on to chapter 22, where we see Abraham's greatest test in our study through the book of Genesis. So I'm Esther, and for John Matthews and our team, saying until then, this is Mission 66.
Has God used today's program in your life? Then you'll want to receive the free study guide that's waiting for you on our website. You can get it right away by downloading it at mission66.org. At mission66.org, you can also leave a comment or make a donation to help this listener-supported ministry. When you give, you're helping listeners experience solid Bible teaching in many languages in some of the most spiritually resistant places in the world. Thank you for helping at mission66.org. Mission 66 is a ministry of Transworld Radio.